This is the Enjoyer Podcast. I'm your host, James Dickson. Hi, I'm James Dickson, and this is the Enjoyer Podcast. For 22 years now, I've been a print journalist in Michigan. Podcasting is a new venture for me. After 2 decades of writing, I've decided to go where the people are. If this were a century ago, I'd be trying to publish a column in the Saturday Evening Post. But it's not. In 2024, podcasting is the new column. Actually, it's more like a column, radio, and TV all wrapped into one. It's more compelling than flat words on a flat screen could ever be. You might say, I'm pivoting to video. That's because using my physical face and my physical voice is the best way to have a conversation with you. Outside of 1 year and another summer in the DC area, I've lived in Michigan all my life. I love Michigan, but I'm worried about it. Today I have one simple question. Would you choose Michigan? You might think that you already have. I'm 40. And so by this age, we all know plenty of people who have left. And it can feel that by staying here, we've actually chosen Michigan. But I'd say that's not true. Not really. In reality, Michigan was chosen for us long ago by our family members. While my grandma was born in River Rouge 100 years ago, my grandfather, Roosevelt Hunter, came to Michigan from Louisiana. He came to Michigan for the reason that nearly every black man came to our cold, out-of-the-way state. He came to work for Henry Ford. So when I say, would you choose Michigan, I want you to view it through the eyes of a Roosevelt Hunter. I want you to view it through the eyes of a Jeff Bezos, owner of Amazon. A few years ago, Amazon was opening a second headquarters. Detroit was never seriously considered for the opportunity. So the powers that be got together and they did what they do best. They tried to offer Amazon a ton of money to come here. Between cash incentives and tax abatements, Michigan would have given away the store to attract the Amazon headquarters and the 50,000 employees who would work there. What does it tell you that when Michigan tried to give itself away, Jeff Bezos wasn't interested? Now, Michigan does have plenty of Amazon fulfillment centers. And that is how we are viewed in the eyes of the world. Good with our hands, not so much with our brains. That Amazon headquarters rejection should have been a wake-up call for us. If Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis have a history tied up in Michigan and kind of a native advantage built with the workforce here, Amazon was a window into how outsiders view us. They view us as the blue-collar people we are, not the white-collar people we aspire or pretend to be. The Amazon decision was not purely financial. There were also quality of life concerns. That Amazon headquarters, too, is meant to house 50,000 workers. So to put that in perspective, that's 50,000 people who could work and live anywhere in the world. That's 0.5% of the Michigan population that would have been imported here all at once. Those kinds of people who could work and live anywhere in the world don't tend to choose Michigan anymore. Not for the most part. And those kinds of people can't be found in Michigan in great numbers outside of the auto industry. Would you, Mr. Bezos, the Mr. Bezos in your head, would you move 50,000 people to a state where the roads have been bad for decades? This has been a known problem for decades. It's a consensus among 10 million people that we have bad roads. People run campaigns on them. Our current governor, Gretchen Whitmer, said she was going to fix the damn roads, and the damn roads are still trash. Would you move 50,000 people to a state with poor schools, where 1 in 3 kids don't show up regularly? Would you move to a state with a high number of power outages, where the power goes out regularly during storms and then stays off for a long time? All of that affects business. Jeff Bezos didn't know it when he rejected Michigan, but our energy situation is actually going to get worse before it gets better. No joke. I wish I were exaggerating. In 2040, Michigan will run on solar panels and windmills. I have a small window into how that will go. I bought a bird feeder recently outside my house with a nightlight. The light runs on solar power. So during the day, it collects the sun, and at night, it uses that power for the light. Several nights a week, the light burns out during the night because it hasn't collected enough sun. We don't get enough sun to operate a nightlight in Michigan, let alone a state. It just doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. You wouldn't do that if you wanted your state to be prosperous. You would do that if you wanted your state to fall. Michigan's a cloudy state even on nice days. And so the powers that be want to dot our freeways and our farmlands with mass amounts of solar panels because it takes a lot of solar to collect any amount of sun. They want our pleasant peninsula to run on wind turbines. What happens when the sun doesn't shine? What happens when the wind doesn't blow? Then we're going to have rolling blackouts. Then we'll close schools and factories. Then we'll sit home on the hottest and coldest days of the year, literally powerless. As Michigan retires reliable sources of energy like coal and natural gas, rolling blackouts will turn into rolling whiteouts. Our state will eventually be default dark, punctuated sometimes with the light. Now see Michigan through the eyes of my grandfather, Roosevelt Hunter. Unlike when Grandpa moved from Louisiana, air conditioning now exists. You can live in any part of the country in relative comfort, at least if you're indoors. Things have changed legally too. You might not hear this on the news, but there are no more second-class citizens in America. There's no Jim Crow law or custom saying which drinking fountain you can use. You can eat at any restaurant, sit at any lunch counter, buy a home in any neighborhood. Nobody will tell you this because anti-racism has become a big business in America. But in 2024, we live MLK's dream. You want to know how little racism we have now? The anti-racist people will tell you in their own words. Actual incidents of racism are so rare that progressives are now reduced to panning for microaggressions. Go watch Eyes on the Prize. The aggressions of the past were macro in nature. Lynchings, school bus bombings, 4 little girls at a church, Bloody Sunday in Selma. We've come a long way in a short time, and we might consider celebrating that at some point. Once upon a time, coming up north from the South meant freedom. Freedom from the heat and freedom from second-class citizenship. Once upon a time, the South's disadvantages were our unfair advantage. We benefited from their downfall. That's all over now. Those days are gone. There's no escape to be found in the Great White North. Not from Jim Crow, not from the heat. Regardless of what Governor Gretchen Whitmer claims, there will be no climate refugees in Michigan. And by the way, we should be wary of such talk. If someone can be deemed a climate refugee because their home country is too hot or too cold for their taste, who does that exclude? Climate refugee, when you hear it, should be understood to mean this. Michigan wants to bring in the poorest people from the Southern Hemisphere. These newcomers, as they are called, are the only reason Michigan holds any illusion that it's actually a growing state. Without them, we'd be obviously shrinking. It's funny about Louisiana, it has the highest native-born population in America. About 80% of people in Louisiana were born in Louisiana. That's 8 out of every 10 people. You know the second highest state? Michigan, at 76%. That means if you were to go meet 3 friends for lunch, at most, one of the 4 of you was born somewhere else. How many people have you ever known to move to Michigan without any family ties? So even that 24% number, even that number is skewed. Because if that outsider moves to Michigan, chances are they have a husband or a wife or a boyfriend or a girlfriend from Michigan. Somebody has roots here. You don't just move here. If I had to guess how many actual American citizens moved to Michigan for school or work without any family ties at all, state of 10 million people, maybe 3%, maybe 5%. But does anyone really think there's 500,000 people in Michigan from somewhere else? Just doesn't seem like it, right? Due to our location in the upper Midwest, nobody just passes through Michigan. Unlike in Ohio or Pennsylvania or in Indiana, every single person who comes here made a choice to do so. Bob Dylan said, "I was born here and I'll die here." He could have been describing Michigan. I'm here because my family is here. My family's here because my grandpa moved here where he met my grandma. That's how I met my mother. I was born here. I enjoy it here, and I'm not leaving. Yeah, we have some knuckleheads running the place, but nothing lasts forever. We chose Michigan because we haven't left Michigan. But that's a very different question than me and you should wrestle with today. Because today our question is, would you choose Michigan? Under what scenario would you become one of those 3 to 5% of people who chooses Michigan without any family roots? Can you envision it? Michigan's auto industry is our heritage. Because Henry Ford lived here when he put the world on wheels, we have a field of global importance in our backyard. That auto industry is why Detroit was a hot spot during the Great Migration. Well, our inheritance is in trouble, and the people who should be defending it the hardest are instead pushing the auto industry toward the graveyard. Michigan's partner in advanced manufacturing is the World Economic Forum, a Swiss nonprofit. Last I checked, Detroit was the once and future king of manufacturing. Why, then, fellow enjoyer, would Detroit get a manufacturing partner that doesn't manufacture anything but white papers? Between the state and Oakland County, taxpayers in Michigan have paid $6 million to build this partnership for advanced manufacturing with a nonprofit. If this were just a waste of money, if this were just about getting Gretchen Whitmer to the Davos conference, that would be bad. But reality is actually worse because I know what those white papers say. A 2019 paper said that Michigan companies could save $2 billion replacing dull, dirty, and dangerous jobs with robots. In other words, companies can improve their bottom line by firing your neighbor and plugging in a robot instead. Another paper argues the need to remove 75% of cars from the road by 2050. This is the language of degrowth, where the fate of companies and workers is no longer tied together because the humans can always be replaced by robots. I wonder how many dull, dirty, and dangerous jobs did Roosevelt Hunter work? Only enough to get married, only enough to put food on the table for 5 kids. Did he get hurt at work? Absolutely. This is the very nature of work and risk. Were those work-related injuries tough for the family and tough for him personally, psychologically? Of course. But how does that compare to the alternative? On season 2 of The Wire, the shipping companies are considering automation for the docks to replace workers. One of the union guys says, "You can't get hurt if you're not working." This is not being done for us. It's being done to us. No one's concerned about the Roosevelt Hunters of the world, but I am, and you should be, because these are the people who make Michigan, Michigan. In Henry Ford's Michigan, a man could make a living working with his hands. While the whole world runs on brains, Henry Ford's Michigan was the outlier. We ran and we run on brawn. In a world that gets around by subway, we run on cars. Convenience is king. If you don't smell like a horse right now, you can thank Henry Ford for that. Michigan was the one place where you didn't need to be a doctor or a lawyer to make a good living. Men who worked with their hands buy homes, they sent kids to college, they put down payments on their kids' homes. It's not an exaggeration to say that the middle class came from Michigan. And so putting an end to our middle class country and our middle class state is essential in ushering in communism. Put simply, nobody with a second home is joining the revolution. In February, Michigan became the first state to repeal its right to work law. After a decade of worker freedom, workers at Ford, GM, and Stellantis now have to pay the UAW to keep their jobs. That happened mid-February. A week later, UAW President Shawn Fain announced plans for a $40 million southern expansion. So no sooner than Michigan tied the UAW millstone around its neck did the UAW say it wants to see other people. The kids would say that Michigan fell for the okie doke, but it's clear to me that the ruin that's coming is planned and intentional. The call is coming from inside the house. 4 years from now, in May 2028, Shawn Fain wants to lead a global general strike. Communists have been talking about this since the days when Karl Marx walked the earth and was not washing his ass, not taking care of his kids, not working, not doing anything important with his life. Shawn Fain wants to be the man to realize that dream. And so this is the man that GM's Mary Barra and Bill Ford at Ford are forced to deal with. A so-called labor leader who doesn't want his members to get rich, he wants to eat the rich. Shawn Fain doesn't support prosperity. He does not want to fatten the flocks of his members. He wants to kill Igor's cows out of spite. So I'll just say the thing. Shawn Fain doesn't want there to be another Henry Ford. He believes it's his job to stand in the way of any man amassing that much wealth. If sabotage would get him put in prison, he settled on the next best thing: unite the workers of the world in walking off the job, all at once. This general strike would be a hard reset of the job market, even more than COVID was. Rather than auto workers face intermittent layoffs, the rolling blackouts of manufacturing, they might work intermittently. It would be more like a rolling whiteout in that scenario. 1 or 2 weeks a month you would work, then you kind of live off the fat of the land the rest of the time. That's what you're being sold, but that's not what you'll get. And if you're an auto worker, don't take the cheese. Do not believe that this will be good for you. If you're an auto worker, you might be annoyed right now, and I get that. 4 years ago, the world got to stay home in its pajamas and pretend it was working on its laptops. But your job can't be done remotely. You take on the risks of work. You drive to work and from work. You operate heavy machinery. There's fights, there's drunk drivers on the road, there's drama at work, you name it. 4 years ago, you were essential, but now you're being treated as useless. Governor Gretchen Whitmer and President Biden are moving full speed ahead on the electric vehicle transition. The official line is that America has no choice but to embrace the EV, that if we don't, China will, and then China will flood the market. That's not true. It's ridiculous, actually. What's slowing EV adoption in America right now is a lack of vehicle range and a lack of charging options. Tesla has responded to this problem by building its own nationwide network of chargers. Until recently, other cars didn't have access to those, but now they do. So charging is a problem for everybody, pretty much except Tesla. It would be a problem for any Chinese upstart selling cheap vehicles. You can't very well flood the market with cars that nobody can charge, right? So the only way Chinese vehicles could penetrate America is if America builds the charging network for them. SEMCOG, the Southeast Michigan Council of Governments, did a story covering 4 scenarios of EV adoption. Under the scenario of extreme fast adoption, American companies would lose market share, and a lot of it. They would lose so much market share that not only would auto industry headcounts go down, but the population of Southeast Michigan as a whole would go down. In the scenario of extreme fast EV adoption, Southeast Michigan would have fewer people in 2050 than it had in 2020. This is a known and documented and studied problem. Why then is our governor adding fuel to the fire? Why is she pushing for 2 million EVs in Michigan by 2030? Why is Biden building a national charging network, offering low-interest loans for companies that build EVs and subsidies for people who buy EVs? This is not a technology that people want in great numbers. This is not a technology that will promote growth. Even if Michigan captures every EV job in America, that's still 1/3 fewer jobs right off the top. So fast EV adoption is the very picture of degrowth. The people who run Michigan, the people who run America are all in on it, knowing full well that this will benefit China and hurt Detroit. Last year, Stellantis laid off workers at a plant in Michigan and another in Ohio. They cited the need to manage sales and avoid the wrong side of California air regulators. I used to say this pretty often before podcasting, but don't California my Michigan. I wish someone had listened. Last year, California air regulators cost people in Michigan their jobs right before the holidays. Soon enough, every automaker will be forced to play by the Stellantis rules. Don't look now, but rolling blackouts are coming to an auto factory near you. Not because of low demand, not because the economy's bad, not even because of inflation, but because people in California believe they can change the global climate one regulation at a time. And the leadership in Washington lets them do it. If nothing changes on this front, nothing will change. My question is, what can we change for the better at this point? When people knock on my door this fall running for office, that's what I want to hear from them. Yes, I want to see a grasp of the issues. That would be nice. But what I really need are people who know what time it is. As I see it, the hour is late. The threats to our prosperity in Michigan are many. Our leaders are moving full speed ahead into problems, and so I need you to join me in sounding the alarm. Look at Michigan through the eyes of Jeff Bezos. You'll see a state that's not even worth the courtesy of despoiling. We offered him everything, and we got fulfillment plants instead of a headquarters. You might not want this to be true, and for years I didn't. But when the world looks at Michigan, it doesn't see an office worker. It sees an auto worker. It sees a guy with a blue collar working in manufacturing, fulfillment, logistics, getting things from point A to point B. That's who we really are. When we were miscast, Jeff Bezos wanted nothing to do with us. But when we play our position, we're the king of manufacturing, same as we ever were. Look through the eyes of a Roosevelt Hunter and you'll see a state that's not worth moving to. There's auto jobs and air conditioners all over America right now. Jim Crow doesn't hold you back. You can go as far as the crow flies, or as far as your money will take you. The risk of Michigan is still great, but where's the reward? Take a job in the auto industry when its partners want to pull cars off the road. Do you want to make the move up here when you know the EV transition will kill jobs? Would you come here with no family ties? Would you choose Michigan? Let me know on Twitter at DownI75. We're using a special made hashtag for this discussion called Would You Choose Michigan? Let me know. Maybe you see it differently. Maybe you are one of those 3 to 5% of people who just moved here for the heck of it. I'd love to hear those stories. I'd especially like to hear from our natives, from the people who born here, gonna die here, they ain't going nowhere, even if the state tries to run them off. I need you to view Michigan through the eyes of the two men I talked about, Jeff Bezos, Roosevelt Hunter. One, a blue-collar man looking for an opportunity, looking for a place to work and a better life, looking for a better life than you can find at your home, so that he was willing to go from one end of the country to the other to find it. The other, a billionaire who could choose to do anything. This guy was just in space recently, and here we are trying to get his attention in Michigan. Didn't really work out well. View Michigan through either one of their eyes, and you'll see that our problems are real. So, I ask again, and I'd love to hear your voice on this. Would you choose Michigan? Now, I get that that was a lot of bad news, especially for something you might want to call the Enjoyer podcast. I get it. Not many of the trends here are good. But here's the good news. The good news is that we have each other. And the good news is that as there's more of us, and as more of us join these conversations, we'll be able to hold the people who run Michigan, the people who cover Michigan, the biggest ideas in Michigan, and together we can move these Overton windows with each other. Like, that's something that can actually happen. And so, what did we learn from the pandemic, right? We learned that power fears when people of belief touch and agree. When we come together as citizens, as neighbors, and we talk and we touch and we say, what exactly needs to be done to fix our state? I think the biggest thing we could do in that regard is get out of the idea that Michigan runs itself. Nothing runs itself. Institutions have never had less credibility than right now. So if we understand that Michigan will only be as good as we make it, we can make it better. But when you accept the fact that, oh, well, the wrong people run it, and there's some bad journalism out there, and there's just no way to get the public the truth, I don't accept the premise of any of that. So regardless of the situation, there's reason for hope, because we have each other, we have breath in our bodies, we have brains in our head, and we're going to figure this thing out together. We're going to figure out what our politicians need to be doing, what they need to stop doing. Some of these EV subsidies I was talking about, that's the kind of thing that's actually hurting us in Detroit. But you'd never know it from reading the press in Michigan. From reading the press in Michigan, you'd think that this was just the best thing that could ever happen. And people like me who have questions about it are like some kind of enemy of progress. What I'm an enemy of is losing a third of our auto jobs. What I'm an enemy of is building China's EV charging network for it. What I'm an enemy of is people who want to come into your house and regulate your ability to homeschool your kid. What I'm an enemy of is when people want to turn our access to energy that is abundantly available into something that only happens intermittently because we're only using certain technologies. Michigan needs to be a state and can once again be a state where people rise to their full human potential. We tamed the environment here, and now we need to tame our political class. We need to look for a politics. We need to be asking, like, how does this benefit us? And how does this hurt us? We need to view everything through that lens. We've been asked to view life through the lens of the Israelis, the Ukrainians, you name it. What about you? What do you want? What does your wife want? What do your kids want? Let's talk about those things together. And then when people come knock on our doors this fall, let's talk about those things with them. See, politics can't happen without us. These people would love if no one cared enough to vote. And so everything in the political game is meant to discourage you from getting involved. It's made to be and to appear inaccessible. But we're going to break these things down. I'm going to help you spot the slant of news stories. I'm going to help you understand what legislation actually does, not just what people say it does. And I'm going to bring on a cast of characters who's going to help me connect these dots, who's going to help me make sense of our beautiful state. So stick around. We're going to get to the truth, and then we're going to move people in our direction. But if we touch and agree, we can accomplish anything. So you have to view this as valuable. You have to view these discussions as necessary, because only when you start from a place of reality and accepting the cold truth about where things stand now, only then can you tilt the playing field in our favor. And that's what we're going to do together, tilt the field. So keep coming back. They won't all be this sad, because as time goes on, I'm going to give you homework assignments. I'm going to give you tasks. You're going to read the bills yourself. You're going to talk to your neighbors about these things that are happening. We're going to talk, we're going to agree, and then we're going to move the people who don't agree onto our side. And we're going to do it together here on the Enjoyer Podcast.